Hey y'all, it's me. Today we're going to do Threefold Section 3 Part 4. The labyrinth surrounding Evergard caught fire. The sight of bluish flames surprised all three of them. Some townspeople, in the trees and hanging from thick vines, watched the bluish flames from a distance, unsure of what to do. Guinness watched the fire burn. A short smile crossed his face. He hadn't expected to see ice fire. This was some wicked shit. He wanted to find the energists who generated it. He heard Junyo behind him. He turned around to find him walking away. "Where are you headed?" Hugo asked Junyo. He didn't turn around. He continued to watch the growing flames. "Lunaria," Junyo said. Hugo's words didn't halt his progress. "We need to do something," Hugo said and faced them. "None of my business," Guinness said, but he headed for the town. "Where are you going?" Hugo asked him. "To find the genetic cryo energist." "To find the genetic Cyro energist," Guinness said. Guinness wanted to fight the energist behind us, but he didn't want to get involved with the trouble. He wasn't there to extinguish flames, but he heard the townspeople struggling to do so. He glanced back at Hugo before he followed his line of sight. The townspeople tried to put out the flames with buckets of dirt, but they failed because the flames were too wild and spread apart. The flames ate the plant life. The flames crystallized the dirt and whatever passed through them. The ice fire raged. Neither he nor Junyo stopped, but Hugo didn't move. "I'll meet you two in Lunaria," Hugo said. Junyo stopped. After taking a few more steps, Guinness did too. "They will handle this themselves," Junyo said. "They won't." "Looks like Evergard is full of kinetic chloro-energists," Guinness said. "I see a few genetic hydro-energists and a kinetic aero-energist. But they won't be able to help. You know that's ice fire, don't you?" "He's right," Hugo said. Junyo didn't say a word, as if he wouldn't justify Guinness's question with an answer. He didn't turn around to face them either. His silence annoyed Guinness, so Guinness continued talking to try and piss him off. "Nothing can put out ice fire except fire," Guinness said. That was as much as he knew. He had never encountered this element, only read about it a couple times. When Junyo faced him with narrowed eyes, proving to him he accomplished his goal, it left Guinness satisfied. He noticed Junyo nod at Hugo. Junyo agreed with him. No, couldn't be. He doubted that. The sounds of the townspeople and the rampaging flames drew his attention. "Nothing they can do," Guinness said. "Nothing we can do either." He crossed his arms. "Unless we find the Cyro energist. I don't see anyone at the source of this ice fire, do you?" Hugo sighed and paced. He glanced periodically at the ice fire devouring the labyrinth. The flames crawled and clawed their way toward the town, but they hadn't reached it yet. The townspeople did their best to fight the flames. They couldn't contain them. "What's with the pacing?" Guinness asked aloud to no one in particular. He tried to keep an eye out for the Cyro energist, but he was having no luck when it came to spotting a suspicious character. Junyo didn't respond. Guinness glanced over at him. Junyo faced him and wore an expression on his face that reminded him of Mateo. Guinness saw an aggression toward him. Mateo would share the same expression when he wanted to say something to him or punch him, but held back. Junyo turned from Guinness to Hugo. Junyo's abilities impressed Guinness, but based on his impression of Junyo, he wouldn't tolerate Junyo's disrespect. "You are concerned," Junyo said to Hugo. "What are you going to do about this?" Hugo stopped and looked at Junyo. "If I had better control over my pyro energy, I could do something, but I'm terrible with it. I hope Mateo didn't cause this to get me to use my pyro energy." He paced some more while clenching and unclenching his fists. Guinness looked hard into Hugo's face. Hugo looked as if he knew he would do something, but wasn't sure what. He saw uncertainty in his face. What about Mateo? If Mateo had something to do with this, Guinness wanted to find and beat the shit out of him more than he already did. You're a genetic pyroenergist, Guinness said in disbelief, and you can't use pyro energy? Bullshit. We're wasting time. Let's go. Hugo felt the need to get involved in other people's problems. He was one of those people. Hugo didn't understand people didn't always need or want someone else's help. Why would Hugo bother with this situation when he had his own with his brother? Because he's an idiot. He watched Hugo turn to the ice flames. He didn't want to ask, but he felt he had to ask. The thought of Mateo being involved aggravated his hate for him. What does Mateo have to do with this? Not sure, Hugo said, but he told me to work with my pyro energy. Hugo said, now this happens. A perfect opportunity. They're connected. Guinness watched Hugo turn to Junyo. And you remember he told me to ask for help, Hugo said. I'm asking you for help so I can help them. I don't believe this, Guinness said. So Mateo, after killing my old man, you've fallen so far you can generate ice fire. I'm weak, Hugo said, pathetic, and whatever. Can you do anything besides shoot off at the mouth? I take suggestions. Fuck you, Guinness said. You won't hear a word from me because I don't give a shit. If Mateo's here, I'm going to kick his ass. Mateo, bring your ass out in the open. We should leave, Junyo said. You yourself said you lack the use of your pyro energy. Fuck Lunaria, Guinness shouted. We can fight here. He looked all around him and watched the rustling of leaves on the trees. He caught Hugo staring at him with a look of disbelief. Junyo watched Hugo and waited for his reply. He gave me a reason to work on it, Hugo said to Junyo. Will you help me? He turned to Guinness. Will you? This isn't about Mateo. This is about innocent people's lives. Guinness faced Hugo. He saw a change in him. Gone was the friendly screwball mediator Hugo from earlier. A serious, determined leader Hugo had taken his place. Everything comes down to your trigger, Junyo said. I don't have a trigger, Hugo said. Jackson and my father tried to access mine, but we couldn't find one. All they managed to do was leave me frustrated. Guinness failed to understand these two. If they talked, Hugo wouldn't manage to help anyone. Our abilities are tied to who we are, Junyo said. You used your pyro energy before. Focus on how you were in that situation, how you were feeling, but also what you were thinking when you first triggered it. Don't get involved, Guinness said. Mateo is stringing you along. This is a game to him. You're playing his game. I don't like to see people suffer, Hugo said. That's why I'm getting involved. I can do something. I'm going to do something. You think I'll fail, but I won't. Guinness shook his head. Did Hugo hear the shit coming out of his mouth? If you two want it, I'm sure you two could tackle this in minutes. But if you won't do anything, I will. A challenge. He could, but honestly the situation was tricky. He ruffled his hair. He brushed the rest of the dirt off him. He could kick some ass, specifically the person generating and controlling the ice fire, but he couldn't touch the ice flames. I've met plenty genetic pyroenergists, Guinness said. By looking at you, I can tell anger's not it. Intensity or enthusiasm. He offered a bit of insight half-heartedly. He reluctantly admitted to himself the townspeople needed Hugo's pyro energy. We ruled those out too, Hugo said. Guinness noticed they had caught the townspeople's attention. Must have been because of his shouting. The townspeople headed after the three of them. At the same time, the flames became 5 towering, fiery figures. 2 figures headed toward the town and blocked the townspeople. 3 made their way toward them. The figures took icy, blazing steps toward their destination and targets. He and Junyo watched Hugo turn his attention on the figures. The expression on his face changed. The figures motivated him. Hugo focused. He focused on them. He focused on the ground. The ground split open. Hugo tried to drop the figures deep underground, but they prevented themselves from falling. They clung to the earth. Guinness and Junyo watched Hugo seal the figures underground. Ice fire exploded out of the earth. The figures climbed out, pulled themselves from underground, and scorched and froze anything in their path. Guinness didn't expect Hugo to showcase such skills. Hugo took him off guard, but his actions failed to extinguish the ice fire. They proved only fire would do what needed done. "Give that up," he said to Hugo. "You need your pyro energy." "Concentrate, Hugo," Junyo said. "Your trigger is your problem." "Junyo can't fix that problem for you," Guinness said. He watched his incoming opponents. He glanced at Hugo. From Hugo's expression, he knew Hugo realized he had to understand the root of his own problem before he could be of any help. He and Junyo stood before the fiery figures, headed their way, and watched the other figures step into the labyrinth. "Thanks," Hugo said. Hugo knew they would get involved until he could. Did he know, or did he manipulate them into getting involved? He glanced at Hugo and watched him close his eyes. No, manipulation isn't in him. Guess this is what genuine gets you. Guinness watched Junyo hurry up a nearby tree. Junyo took his firearm from his holster and tried to aim at one of the figures headed toward the town. When he couldn't get a clear shot, Guinness watched him leap from branch to branch to get closer. Despite his size, Junyo was pretty nimble. He watched the townspeople catch sight of him and immediately become hostile. Junyo aimed at one of the towering figures again. Vines and tree branches extended toward him. Junyo leapt down the tree onto the labyrinth and near one of the figures. He took his firearm, turned it on its side to maneuver a shot. He swiped it through the air to produce a thunder shockwave that exploded the ice flames high into the air. As the ice flames fell, Junyo had to shoot several more shots before the flames went out. Junyo destroyed one of the figures. Guinness kept his mouth from falling open. Next, Junyo had to battle against the labyrinth. The kinetic chloro energist controlled it to capture and attack him. Guinness noticed Junyo didn't use his lightning. Junyo knew an actual fire wouldn't help matters if no one could control it. He also knew thunder wasn't very effective against nature because he didn't bother to use it against the nature attacking him. How Guinness would take on the three fiery figures in front of him, he didn't know. But before he could come up with a plan, vines wrapped around one of his legs. He realized he had to keep the chloro energist from attacking Hugo. He hated the idea, but if Hugo got captured, it would mean Evergaard's end. The vines wrapped around his other leg and began to climb up. Some more began dropping down from above. When the vines grabbed his arms and wrapped around his body, he dropped 2 ice spears onto the ground from his hands. He expanded the ice spears to grow and branch out, and they tore through the vines, restraining his legs and arms. After he pulled them off, he took hold of his axe and grabbed onto a branch from the ice tree he formed. Some of the chloro energists tried to destroy the ice tree and get at him. He gave himself a safe stronghold within his ice tree. He used his axe to cut through vines and branches that came at him. Continued use of his cryo energy began to make him physically sick. Fucking short recovery time. He never relied on it this much because he wasn't in tune with it. This was a long-haul fight. He had to give it a break. Before he left Hugo, he tossed several spears in front of Hugo. He used them to hide Hugo behind ice trees. Afterward, he ran toward the chloro energist with his axe in hand. He noticed Junyo run across the labyrinth. The chloro energist tried to pull Junyo into it. Using bouts of rolling thunder, Junyo kept them off him, but this didn't stop them from advancing. The chloro energist used the labyrinth. They continued trying to seize him. He dispatched the second fiery figure. He jumped across the gap and extinguished it with a second upward thunder shockwave. He landed, kept running, and extinguished the remaining flames with multiple shots. With both figures gone, he returned his firearm to his holster and allowed the chloro energist to take him. Still, ice flames survived his assault and flared around him. Guinness deduced Junyo decided to show the townspeople they had nothing to do with the flames. Men like Junyo wouldn't allow themselves to go down this way. The townspeople waited for the flames to engulf him, and they were as surprised as Guinness when the flames kept their distance. They didn't touch Junyo, only continued to burn and freeze everything around him. What the fuck? On top of that, the three fiery figures headed his way wouldn't let him go after the Chloro energies, and they wouldn't let the Chloro energies go after him. What type of shit? He watched the rustling of leaves on the trees, but they couldn't tell him who was controlling the ice fire. He waited for his nauseous feeling to die down before he engaged the fiery figures. They moved toward Hugo's location. He grew ice trees through the figures to try and slow them down. They simply walked through the ice trees, melting them and causing them to become frozen puddles on the ground. He threw more ice spears and grew more trees. This caused him to stop and try to catch his breath. He entangled the fiery figures in melting and refreezing ice. He managed to make them halt, but the ice flames raged out of control. He wished he could get a hold of Mateo. Using his cryogenesis had drained him considerably. He needed to fight him one-on-one to recover some of his strength and to show him he wasn't one to hide behind abilities. A column of ice flames surrounded and encircled his ice trees, the fiery figures, and him. It blocked out everything else. When the fiery figures dispersed, he saw someone standing and watching him as his ice trees melted into puddles. He saw the family resemblance. Jackson, Guinness said. He held his axe while he tried to keep his body upright. Correct, Jackson said. Brave of you to take on ice flames, but not smart. Tell me where I can find Mateo, Guinness commanded. He pointed his axe at Jackson. You couldn't hold your own against Junyo, Jackson said. Those multiple electric shocks to your body and the continued use of your cryo energy are about to cause you to collapse any minute. Even if you were in top form, you would be burning and freezing to death before you could think to beg to stop me. Mateo wasn't the one generating ice fire. Jackson controlled it. Guinness took a step toward Jackson, and the flames from the column whipped around him and kept him in place. The flames held him without freezing against him or setting him ablaze. He respected Jackson's skills. Mateo or Jackson, it didn't matter. Now that the Energist wasn't hiding behind the ice fire, he was as good as gone. Guinness wouldn't hold back. I wouldn't, Jackson said. Guinness ignored him. He tried to break free of the flames with sheer strength. Jackson burned his arms for the attempt. Guinness dropped his axe. With his ice flames, Jackson bound Guinness's wrists behind his back and bound his legs together. Guinness fell to his knees. Guinness grit his teeth as the flames crawled over his skin and felt like a knife stabbing him again and again. Done yet? Jackson asked. If you don't listen to me, your situation will grow worse, and so will the situation facing the city. Guinness saw 3 new fiery figures form behind Jackson within the column. At the sight, he felt defeated. He wouldn't let Jackson see that in him. He grit his teeth. Although Jackson and Hugo looked similar, the similarities ended there. Jackson was ruthless. He didn't give a shit. He was also on the same level as Mateo. Jackson made a good point earlier. If Junyo gave him trouble, how would he defeat him? He couldn't defeat an ice fire wielding Jackson. He couldn't defeat a light wielding Mateo. And he wouldn't avenge his old man. To generate and control ice fire means you're something, Guinness said. You're nothing like Hugo. I'm nothing like Hugo, Jackson said. I came first, and he's something like me. Guinness wanted to know what that meant, but he knew there was no sense in asking about it. He struggled to break himself from his fiery restraints and suffered for it. No matter what you do, you won't get free, Jackson said. I know you're hard of hearing, but you need to relax. You have a job to do. All of you, all you have to do is call for help. Hugo will come for you. There's nothing he can do, Guinness said. Compared to you, he's piss poor. He laughed. Shut your mouth, Jackson said. Don't piss off the man with your life in his hands. The tone of his voice chilled Guinness more than the ice flames that bound him. He almost believed Jackson would end him. You're bluffing. The next moment, Jackson's ice flames were at his neck. Guinness lurched forward and grit his teeth even more. Jackson wouldn't kill him. No, Jackson needed him alive for Hugo to save him. For that to happen, all he had to do was cause him as much pain as possible. Stubborn might have been an understatement, Jackson said. Mateo said that about me, Guinness said, ignoring his pain. He did. I sent you that note and told you to come here to look for him, but you won't find him. Not until you reach Lunaria with Hugo and Junyo. Guinness laughed. I'm not going anywhere. I'll take you on and him right now. He couldn't, but at this point, he wanted to fuck with Jackson. The fact that he couldn't free himself from this torture or save himself from Jackson made him hate himself. Call for help, Jackson said. Even Junyo will come to your aid. Although you might want to be wary of him. He's a killer. Fuck you, Guinness said. He snarled. Jackson drove flames into his back. After a few minutes of trying to hold his pain down, he yelled out. Ugh! He shut himself up and forced a bitter laugh as he stared down at the scorched earth in front of him. He wouldn't admit defeat. You're supposed to have changed, Lissandro, Jackson said. Guinness lifted his head and glared at Jackson with fury and hate. All right, guys, that was part 4. Tomorrow we're going to do part 5. I hope you listened and enjoyed this, and we'll listen again tomorrow. All right, have a good night. Bye.